Chapter 24. Eleanor reached out and separated her daughter from her son. Okay, and this is a perfect example of why I didn't want the two of you touching or getting too close at home. Kaitlyn shoots electricity and fries the town, whereas Penny could burn down our house. John and Chantel kept a nervous eye out as the mother began quietly talking to her daughter. Sweetie, do you remember what I've been teaching you about control and the breathing exercises? All of that? Penny nodded. Good, I want you to forget all of that for the moment. Chantel spun around while John quirked a curious brow. I want you to instead run along behind us with your father, dragging your hand along the wall for as long as the flame lasts. Understood? All right, Mom. But won't that set this place on fire? Yes, dear, it most certainly will. That's what they get for daring to kidnap you and your father. But don't do something like this again without me or your father's permission. She finished lamely, after seeing her husband's expression. Jason grabbed hold of Penelope's non-flaming hand and pulled her to the back of their little group. Is that something you used to be able to do as well when you were younger? Jack asked his mother as they picked a direction and began moving again. Not just when I was younger. I still can. Ice might be my dominant element now, but my fire is as strong as ever. She cursed suddenly as they all heard some new voices. We have incoming. I'm telling you, I can feel something giving off powerful magic this way. A distant voice could be heard saying from up ahead and around a corner. Everyone looked first at Penelope and the small flame in her hand, to Jack, and nodded. In their haste to rescue Jason and Penny, they had forgotten that the untrained generator in their midst had no control over himself. He was constantly putting out energy and acting like a beacon. It was no wonder someone had noticed their presence. It was a miracle that it hadn't happened sooner. Wherever everyone who was normally down here had gone, they must just now be returning. Which meant they would need to deal with them, and the growing fire at their backs. It had seemed like a good idea at the time, but now it could be what ended up killing them if they weren't careful. Not that Eleanor was all that worried about that happening. Between her, John, and Chantel, they should have more than enough power and ability to get everyone out. However, on the off chance they did run into something truly troubling, then they also had Kaitlyn and Jack they could use. It wasn't ideal, but the two could bring some truly destructive power to bear if they were serious. But she was getting ahead of herself. Right now, they only had a couple of scrubs to deal with first. Maybe they would even be nice enough to tell them where the exit was while they were at it. John and Eleanor hopped forward, ready to disable anyone that came into view. Closer to everyone else, Chantel held up her magnifying tube at the ready for anyone they missed or were unable to contain in time. You might be onto something. I'm starting to feel something now too. Are you sure it's a spell? A second voice asked, just as three distracted people walked around the corner. A controlled burst of ice magic from both mages closest to them was chopped down at the back of their necks. John's victim crumbled to the floor in death, while Eleanor's merely had his spinal cord frozen. The third person had a clean little hole burned above his left eye, courtesy of Chantel. They had needed one alive for directions, while the rest were destined to die. As the Baron of this territory, Eleanor had the undisputed right to pass judgment on any and all magic users therein. As long as they were of a lower status, of course. Even though the council had been ignoring their duties to her, that didn't mean she was going to ignore her own when they were right in front of her. Not anymore, at least. She slapped the one still alive, shocking his mind back into action. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and you are going to answer them. Do you understand? His eyes took in his dead companions, and he quickly nodded. Good. Now what are you all trying to create down here? I don't know. I'm not one of the scientists, I'm just a T-Tech. All I know is they're doing something with the monsters they've brought in. Nightwalkers of every kind have been brought in over the last few months. He was stuttering constantly as he tried to get the words out. And how did they come to this agreement with the local baron? There is no local baron here. There hasn't been for years. The others on the sides have been famously fighting over the territory for a while now. Eleanor glanced at John and Chantel in confirmation, who only shrugged. We have no idea. We knew this place was quiet and saw very little action. However, We saw no references to the Baron when we were investigating it." She turned back to the scared man on the ground. Her mind was spinning through possibilities she wasn't liking. How do we get out of here? They had spent too much time down beneath the warehouse already. It was past time for them to make their escape and end this farce. Plus, it sounded like she was going to have more than the expected trouble when the other barons notified the council. She was going to have to call for a truth spell to be used as judgment if they tried going too far. He stuttered out some instructions and they went on their way, leaving the paralyzed man in their wake. He wouldn't survive long regardless, not with the fire Penelope had started. Eleanor stopped abruptly to look at her daughter and the man behind them. That was right, if they left the man alive, then his death would be on her. She couldn't let her daughter deal with that, not yet. Undoubtedly that day would come, but she could put it off for now and she would. She ran back to the man and knelt beside him. "Sorry, but I can't have your blood on my daughter's hands," she whispered moments before freezing his heart. There was a time to use structured spells and a time for instinctive magic. Fighting was always easier with instinctive magic. Jack nodded at his mother as she rejoined them and took up the lead once more. He had a good idea of why she had just done that and thought that it was a good choice. It was obvious that things were different now than they had been before. Mentally, that was obvious. Emotionally, he thought he was handling it well. However, he hadn't had to kill anything yet, nor was he as young as his sister. Their backgrounds hadn't prepared them for any of this. Something that he wasn't sure he should thank his mother for, or curse her for doing. It was such a double-edged sword. They had gotten to enjoy a few normal years. Yet it had come at the cost of preparing them for what was out there. It was a conundrum. The fire alarm started ringing a corridor later. The magical fire burned hot and put out very little smoke. It had taken time for it to finally reach the tipping point and set off its hidden sensors. Penny started dragging her finger along the wall again, extinguishing the remaining flame she had built up in the process. They raced through the corridors, following the directions the man had given them. At last, they reached an area they recognized from earlier, and ran even faster to the room they knew would lead them up. The room was packed with nightwalkers of every kind, with a few magic users at the back for good measure. There were more types of beings than Jack had been expecting, that was for sure. The long-limbed creepy sobs with elongated fangs clinging to the walls and ceiling were easily identifiable as vampires. The shifters were harder to make out because of their sheer variety. However, he did spot the acid drooler who seemed to be stalking them. Other than them were the walking statues that he was guessing were gargoyles. There was even a fellow with black eyes at the back that looked like he was possessed. And those were only the ones he recognized. There were several more that he didn't. Jack discreetly took a few quick photos with his phone and sent them to the cloud before turning it off and pulling out the battery. He wasn't sure if that would be enough to protect it from Kaitlyn, but he could hope. Either way, the photos could only help his mother's case when the council showed up later. If he was wrong, then they would simply delete the photos and pretend they never existed. Eleanor pushed John to the side and stepped to the fore, ensuring everyone's attention was on her. "I'm sure someone among you lot can speak. So tell me what this is about." The shifter with the caustic drool problem spoke up, spitting with each word. "The food speaks. All of you are such delicious meals. Except for the normal one and the snack." His eyes trailed to Jack. "But there is one among you better than the others." Everyone on both sides backed away from him with a hiss as they were splashed. "Yes, we all know you idiots think with your stomach and nothing more. That doesn't explain your actions tonight or in trying to revive the Banes." The Nightwalkers all grinned at the name. "You were getting in on our way. It was just business." A magic user at the back answered. "Well, you took up residence in my domain without permission. I think it was justified." Eleanor returned without hesitation, not impressed by their numbers in the slightest. She had been through far worse than a few untrained Nightwalkers and barely competent magic users. This group wouldn't even be enough to slow her down if she got serious. "Penelope, I want you to close your eyes. Can you do that for me?" Jason asked his daughter, turning her head around to face him. She didn't need to see whatever happened next. Penny nodded quickly and buried her face in his stomach. The group of Nightwalkers in the room took a step back from her. There is no baron for this territory. The last one caused a purge and was booted from the position. The speaker was a woman standing with the other shifters. She had a forked tongue and slit-like eyes. Chantal smirked. The council would never remove a baron from their position for such a silly reason. The entire point of having them is to adjudicate and manage their lands. They are the judges of everything that happens inside their domains. The ultimate voice. She was well within her right to kick you all out and then take more extreme measures when you refused to leave. There were a few muttered and scattered cursings among the group. Then why haven't we heard anything from her again before now? Simple, I was busy raising my family, and as long as you stayed out of my way and didn't cause any trouble, I didn't care. Eleanor half lied, unwilling to tell them the truth. However, you then went and started to cause trouble again. Then to make matters worse, you started hunting my son and his girlfriend. The temperature in the room plunged as a layer of ice instantly formed on the floor. And now, as if that wasn't bad enough, you decided it was smart to go and kidnap my husband and daughter. Apparently, I have been too lenient with all of you for the last few years. The only answer is to go about and do another purge. First though, I want to know about the Banes. A chilling mist engulfed everyone as she shouted. When it dissipated a moment later, 3 of the shifters had been turned into ice statues. She may have only frozen 3 of them solid, but her ice had immobilized each of them. It had climbed up to above their knees and frozen them in place. None of them, except possibly the strongest among the group, were going anywhere. It was an incredible display of power, to Jack at least, and even Kaitlyn seemed shaken by it. It had been quick and brutal in its efficiency. Eleanor looked past each of the Nightwalkers to the shivering magic users at the back. I asked you a question. Who is trying to bring back the Banes and why? Her voice was almost deathly quiet in the sudden chill. We don't know his actual name, just that he likes to be called Oberon. Some joke about being king of the forgotten fairies. Eleanor stilled, the temperature dropping impossibly lower. Jack stepped back, along with Kaitlyn and the rest of their group. His mother was controlling her element almost inhumanly well, with little of the cold being felt by those behind her. That is until the sudden drop just then. The ice could be seen creeping up the bodies of the various Nightwalkers as they desperately hacked at it. The cold slowed their movements as their bodies began to shut down. What did you say he likes to be called? Oberon. A different magic user at the back stuttered out. That's what I thought you said, Eleanor growled through clenched teeth. She took in a deep breath and let it out slowly. Now, what about the second part of my question? Why is he trying to bring back the Banes? We don't know. All we've been told is that this isn't the only site doing research into the subject for him. Shut up, weakling, the monster that had been hunting Jack and Kaitlyn hissed. Its acid spit dribbled from its mouth and froze before it could even hit the ground. I wouldn't talk if I was you. You might bite your disgusting tongue. She stepped closer and touched a piece of its singed fur. It's too bad they didn't manage to finish you off that night with the fire. It's a mistake I won't make. A ring of ice extended out from where she had touched its fur. Within moments, it had become another ice-encased beast, unable to react as she ended its life. One final question, well, two. Eleanor stepped around the half-frozen Nightwalkers and approached the magic users. She stopped briefly by the possessed fellow before deciding to ignore him. Demons had their own agendas, and it was best to not mix with them. When was the last time you saw Oberon, and where can I find him? I've never met him. The cold was really getting to the one who had been speaking. He doesn't come out here. Something about an old acquaintance in the area. She growled. So the rat bastard did know I lived out here, and he still let them set up a facility. What is he playing at? The gargoyles, beings of living stone, turned to face her as she retreated to the far side of the room. Please do not shatter us. There are so few of us remaining. It pleaded. They could survive the cold and the heat from the coming fire, but they couldn't be put back together again. You should have thought of that before getting into bed with someone like Oberon then. She hissed back. Chantal nodded. Typical for a gargoyle, always wanting to participate, but never wanting to pay the price. Her eyes flicked to the possessed man at the back, obviously including him in her statement as well. Come on, everyone. I think it's time for us to leave. Eleanor wasn't going to do anything more in view of Penelope. Jack was mature enough to understand the actions she took. Her daughter, on the other hand, would already be having nightmares from everything that had happened. The last thing she wanted was for Penelope to be afraid of her. It was better for her to never see what she was about to do. Eleanor waited for them to pass before pausing beside the possessed man. Last I checked, I had a deal in place with a Maimon to keep your kind out of my territory. When you get back to hell, tell him I want to speak with him, and if you don't, I'll reach out to him on my own soon. Is that understood? The possessed man slowly nodded. Yes, Mistress of Ice and Fire. So you've heard of me. That makes me wonder why you would come here then. My prince was concerned. Her eyes sharpened and she gave a quick nod. I'll be looking forward to that conversation then. It's been a while since he and I have talked. It'll be good to catch up again. Abruptly the possession ended and the man slumped over, dead. Anything that had a prince from hell worried was more than qualified to do the same to her. She flash froze the rest of the inhabitants inside the room and climbed the steps after everyone. The main floor of the warehouse was quiet. The trucks had all left, and the security personnel had been put to sleep by the magic users before they went down a few minutes earlier. Jack raised a brow at his mother as she joined them. We're good. Can someone please grab all the shipping manifest from the office, along with anything else that looks useful? As soon as that's done, Kaitlyn, I want you and Jack to light this place up. Fry all the electronics in the area. I want that fire below to go undisturbed, so it can consume as much as possible. John jogged into the office with his wife and began grabbing everything they thought looked interesting. Their arms quickly filled, and they were forced to snag a couple of bags from the guards to use instead.